So folks who are on the call, let us know your answer to this question as well. We'll wait another minute, get people on here. So are you more of a wallflower or more of a social butterfly? And then we'll kind of get started here. So Tom, whenever you're ready, you can take it away. I think we'll get underway now.
All right. Well, folks, very warm welcome. I have been quietly excited about this, I have to say, ever since I met Robbie, because he's got this thing that there's this fantastic need for, and it's so unmet, it's so unserved. And as you'll soon discover, Robbie's also got a very unique style. He's very authentic, very genuine. You're not going to get any hype or BS, which, was sort of, I think, the first primary quality I always look for when I host events like this. But that's just my personal take. From a kind of a formal bio side, Robbie's been recognized as a networking expert by some of the largest business-to-business communities in the world, including Inc. and Lifehacker. He's the author of a best-selling book, Croissants versus Bagels, which you can see is it's very clever. Is on the cover there, he's also a professional member of the National Speakers Association for his sins, and he's been speaking regularly on the subject of inclusive and engaging connections for a little over 10 years now, Robbie, would it be?
Yeah, about that.
Right. And so now you've got this fabulous niche that he's going to share with us, which is we all go to conferences. Well, at least if you don't, shame on you, you should. And we all go primarily, I guess, for the speakers. But how often have you walked away and you've said to someone, the speakers are good, but, the best thing I got was I spoke to this person and I got a connection. We got a lead. And Mara, you need to mute yourself. Yeah. Or I can do it. Can I do it? I don't know.
I'm going to mute everyone and you can just hop back in.
Yeah, I can't. But okay. Yes. So there's this massive need there in the marketplace. And Robbie's going to show you how to make the most out of those conferences. Robbie, that's enough for me. Let's get over to you.
All right, then. I'm going to just individually mute everyone. Oops, including myself. So if at any point you find yourself unmuted, kindly mute yourself, just so we get a clean recording here. So there we go. I think some reason the mute all wasn't working perfectly. So I just hello, everybody. This is fantastic. I have been not so quietly excited about this, Tom. It's just a good opportunity to share what I love with an entirely new community. So I'm excited to do that. And I'm just so thrilled that you're able to join me for this session. And I want you to know I am going to be sharing a ton of content. This is not a hype session with a big sales pitch at the end or anything like that. This is truly a content-filled session. So, get your pens and keyboards ready. But before I do that, I want to share a little bit about myself. So this is my toddler meeting my his little brother just 9 months ago. So I have two little kids. And the cutest part of this moment is his instinct was to sing the ABCs to his little brother, which was super cute. And I want you to know that about my family because I'm a work-at-home dad, and these are my wonderful coworkers. And they're awesome, but they're a little more distracting than Facebook would be. So prior to becoming my own boss, I worked for several nonprofits, the last of which was GLBTQ Legal Advocates and Defenders. I was at GLAAD for a decade, and as their senior manager of events and donor engagement, I managed 25 events a year and worked with their major donors to raise nearly $1 million annually. And this photo is from GLAAD's Summer Party, which is an outdoor event with 600-700 people, a huge silent auction, a lot of fun, and a lot of work. I wasn't satisfied organizing 25 events a year, so I ended up founding Socializing for Justice a year later in 2006. And SoJust was a grassroots, cross-cultural, cross-issue progressive community network in Boston. It grew to over 3,000 members in 11 years. And it was while organizing this group that I first began to really think about what it meant to create a welcoming community and got the idea for my signature session, Art of the Schmooze. It's also where I met my wife, Jess, who's pictured here. She has been my biggest supporter and best co-collaborator I could ever ask for. Now, I left my career at the end of 2014 to pursue my passion for speaking. At that point, I had been speaking on the side for 5 years. And it's been truly a gift to be able to work with so many different organizations and individuals, helping them shift their mindset around relationship building so they become more aware of and discover the opportunities and the business possibilities in the world around them, and even more importantly, know how to act on them. And while I can't claim to have ever been a shy introvert, I do know what it feels like not to belong. And I think back to my earliest memories of not fitting in and feeling like everyone else was best friends and I was the only one who didn't belong. And it goes back to day camp when I was a preteen. I can vividly remember walking up to campers, standing in one of those circles, chatting, and just feeling like I didn't have a way in, like they didn't invite me to join them. Now, at the time, I didn't have language to discuss the ways I felt different. I didn't yet know that I was queer or would later come out as transgender. But over the years, I have developed some strategies for managing that angst that we all feel, right, when we're meeting lots of new people. The setting could be a conference, a networking event, or as a dad in a mostly mom group, which I had that experience a lot in the last couple of years. Meeting new people is a requirement for building my professional network and likely yours too. This requires that we go to new spaces and figure out whether we fit in, whether we can find our people and connect with them in a meaningful way. Which brings me back to this webinar, and it's all about how to make the most of your next conference experience. See, I love conferences. I do. And I know there will always be powerful plenaries and lots of amazing content on breakout sessions. And of course, it's an opportunity to have a reunion with colleagues, and there will be networking opportunities. Now, unfortunately, most people manage to take care of all the logistics of getting to an event, booking their travel, paying the registration fee, but they don't set the intention to actually meet people. Now, these days, you don't even have to leave your house to consume great content. Webinars, podcasts, YouTube, books, you just stay in your pajamas all day. But if you decided to go to this event, set the intention to make great connections. Now, the power of conferences is that they convene people. You are not just going for the content. You might be wondering, though, what if you're attending alone or for the first time or both? You're definitely not the only first timer or the only one flying solo. You'll learn strategies in this session that will help you make great connections. So let's talk for a moment about the kind of experience you want to have at this event. Do you just want to collect a bunch of business cards, or do you want to create genuine connections? Year after year, you attend myriad events and conferences, conventions. You collect dozens of business cards at each of these events and bring them back to the office with good intentions, right? You place those business cards next to your keyboard, and then later in the week, you move them, adding them to the pile you have in the back corner of your desk. In a few months, you'll decide it's time for some spring cleaning, and you'll move all these business cards, neatly stacked, of course, into a drawer. A year later, you'll find them in that drawer, not remember where they were from or what follow-up you had meant to do or whether you'd even done it. And so you recycle those cards, and then you head right back out to another event and start that maddening cycle all over again. So if you can relate to this, type yes in the chat box. I want to know whether people are resonating with this kind of this crazy cycle of networking. So I'm just going to see, is there anyone else out there that can relate to the idea? Awesome. Yes, I'm onto that. There is a difference between collecting business cards and building relationships. It's really important, though, to always have a strategy, right? Going into these moments, you want to have a strategy and a sense of purpose. And one way to do that is to be able to answer some questions. So, for instance, why this event? Out of all of the possible events that you could attend, why this one? What do you hope to learn? What inspiration are you looking for? And who do you want to meet? Now, a lot of these events will have some sort of app, and I want to make sure you're taking full advantage of the features in these apps. In particular, the idea of signing in and then filling out your profile in the attendee section so that your fellow participants can learn more about you and connect with you. So take advantage of that. Really look through all the sessions. Don't just show up and wing it. Make this your conference. Setting goals for networking is always a good idea. And you're going to want to set personal goals for how many people you want to meet and how many you want to reconnect with. You need to be doing both. Now, if you only collect new business cards, you're not deepening your connection with the people you already know. And if you only speak to the people you know, you're missing out on one of the greatest benefits of conferences, which is expanding your personal and professional network. Now, some people are introverted, so having goals might help them keep mingling. And then others of you, including me, are really extroverted, so we're great at mingling. But we might need to set some personal goals to make sure we're having meaningful connections and not just, quick handshakes and hugs with everyone we see. If you tend to be shy and this is your first time at the event, I encourage you to make an effort to mingle in the middle of the room. First timers who speak to other wallflowers often feel really stuck at the end of that conversation because there's no graceful way to exit. Neither of you knows anyone, so you can't make introductions. On the other hand, if you're regular, then by all means, chat with the wallflowers and help them feel really connected in the room. As your conversation winds down, invite someone to join you, and now you can gracefully part ways. It's important to realize that first-time attendees who are hanging out on the edges of the room, they're not necessarily new to your field. They just might be new to this event and maybe a little overwhelmed by the vibrant chaos of it all. So I have a tip for people who are a little more shy or introverted. So if you're someone who's more shy or introverted, type me in the chat box so I have a sense of who's listening in. If you're a little more shy or introverted, just type me in the inbox. All right, I'm seeing some me's pop up. That's great. So here's a tip. You're going to love this. So, during those breakout sessions, people tend to talk really fast and the dialogue just goes quickly. And, those more outgoing and extroverted people, myself included, tend to dominate that space. Well, you might not be the type of person who will just jump right in and maybe tend to think through what you'd like to say before you say it. So, of course, by the time you're ready to speak up, the conversation has moved on. Well, I want you to raise your hand anyway. I want you to just raise your hand, and when you finally get called on, say, a moment ago, we were talking about XYZ. Then share your point or question, and then add, I would love to chat with folks about this afterwards. So, just find me at the end of the session if you're thinking about these issues. And then stick around at the end of the session. Don't hop on your phone. Don't run out the room. Actually make some eye contact with folks as they're leaving. And the amazing part is that someone might come up to you right then or during lunch and start a conversation about that topic that you raised. And since you're probably more comfortable in a one-on-one conversation, this is going to be so great for you. But it's only possible if people know what you're about. So you need to raise your hand. Quite a bit of the conference actually takes place outside of these breakout sessions. And so let's talk about some of the ways to navigate the vibrant chaos of the hallway and those crowded receptions. I've been leading sessions, as Tom said, for nearly a decade, and what I'm about to share is by far my most memorable takeaway, which is why it became the name of my book. It's all about body language and what you can do to help make the conference a more welcoming and inclusive space. What you see on the right side of your screen is that typical cluster of guests, and these clusters, which I call bagels, are not easy to break into. And if you're a first-time attendee and don't know anyone, you'd be looking for an easy way to join a conversation. Not seeing one, you might just circle the room and then head to the next breakout session really early, which means you're going to be missing out on all the possible connections that are happening in the hallway between sessions. Even if you've attended this conference several times, you'll sometimes find yourself at a loss as to sort of, where to go in the room. On the left side of your screen, guests are standing together with a really clear opening. That is the croissant that we're looking for. This is helpful on a personal level, right? So it helps you sort of navigate the room and flow in and out of conversations with greater ease. It also changes the dynamics of all the people in the room. Even if you were standing with just one other person, you can create what I'm calling a croissant, right? An opening for others to join you. What you're going to do is you stand with your feet shoulder width apart, right? One leg back just a little bit, about a half step back, and then you put your weight on your back leg and turn your torso slightly towards whichever foot is in back. And now suddenly you're approachable and can easily invite anyone passing by to just join the conversation. So, okay, what exactly is the stance again? Your weight is on your back leg, and you're just turned slightly either towards like 2 o'clock or 10 o'clock. This is not a wide position. It's not first position ballet. It's just a simple shift in your body language and an increased consciousness about those who are around you, and awareness of who's around you. This simple physical act is one of the best ways to navigate an event and create welcoming community space. I found that only a small percentage of attendees need to be practicing this, and the effect will begin to be felt by everybody. They'll all leave wondering, like, why did that event feel so friendly and welcoming? So remember, don't bagel, and look for those croissants when you're heading into your next conference. You'll be able to find much more friendly conversation that way. Now, effective and inclusive networking isn't just about body language. It's also about what we say, especially right after we meet someone. The thing is, sometimes the very questions we ask have the opposite effect of welcoming. They're actually kind of off-putting and othering. Let's say for a moment you could be a unicorn. What would your day be like? Are you picturing rainbows and sunny skies? What's more likely your day, you'd spend your day hearing, wow, a unicorn. I've never met a unicorn. Hey, what's it like to, followed by lots and lots of curious questions. Now, many of us have had this experience. We've walked into a room of strangers feeling kind of awkward, out of place. We felt like we're the only blank in the room, different from everyone else in some kind of important way. We are momentarily grateful when a stranger approaches us and begins to start a conversation. We've been saved from standing by ourselves. We begin to second guess how fortunate we are, though, when out of the gate, one of their first comments is, wow, you're tall. How tall are you? Oh, boy. Your hair is so, can I touch it? When their hand is already entangled in your hair. Or you got such great skin. Beautiful mocha color. So lucky. Ugh. I've never heard anyone with your name so exotic. So these all seem like compliments, but in practice, they're calling out difference. And the result is you're more likely to feel othered than welcomed, especially if the feature that they just commented on is always commented on by strangers. Now, if you were a unicorn, you'd have people touching your horn all the time with, barely a cursory request for permission. And it doesn't even have to be a really rare feature for someone to want to move into your personal space. This touching without permission happens to pregnant people all the time. And pregnancy is far from rare, or, well, we wouldn't all be here. If you were a unicorn, people would ask, where are you from? And they wouldn't be satisfied hearing where you grew up if what they're really asking is, where did your family emigrate from? This isn't something you'd think to ask a person who wasn't a unicorn and didn't in some way stand out because they're different. So I'm wondering if the folks on the call, do you think that there are things that people sometimes comment on? Are there things about you that people tend to always ask about or inquire about? If so, I would love you to write, I'm a unicorn too, in the chat box. I think a lot of times I hear from guys, it's that I'm really tall. I was at a conference the other day where there was someone who was close to 6'8" and a person who was closer to 4 feet, and they were standing next to each other at one point. It took a lot to not interrupt that moment to say something, because I know that they get asked those questions all the time. So maybe the way you've experienced this whole unicorn business, well, it hasn't been quite so overt. Perhaps you tend to share a lot of features with other people in the room, so your differences don't stand out quite so much. It may then be jarring to learn that these conversation starters aren't received as compliments. See, a compliment is when you say something nice about a feature that someone else chose. For example, The answer to any of the following observations would be a sincere thank you, and then the conversation would be off to an upbeat start. I love the color of your jacket. Your necklace is beautiful. Where did you get it? Were you traveling? You've got great style. Where do you shop? Those frames, they look really great on you. See, these are all different than the first examples because the comment is about something chosen rather than a curious comment or question about who we are. We don't choose our height or our skin color or accent or myriad other features that makes all of us unique. We do get to choose what we wear, and the woman in pink in this photo clearly put a lot of thought into her outfit. You could compliment her on her outfit, but don't ask to touch her hair or honestly even ask her about her hair. Before uttering the first thought that comes into your head when you first meet someone, just check first to be sure you're not asking merely out of curiosity. That usually means you've noticed something different about the person in front of you. You're about to hone in on that difference by asking about it. Since that likely happens to this person all day, every day, they're just going to give you a pat answer that likely won't lead to further discussion, and you won't make a great or long-lasting impression. You'll miss the opportunity to really engage with them. Now, keeping track of these new ways of navigating a room, it may feel like a lot to some of you, especially if this is going to be your first time at this particular event. Maybe overwhelmed just by the sheer size of the event, and you would love to have a welcome wagon waiting for you when you arrive. Well, that's why I think that anyone who's been attending for several years or even perhaps decades should be encouraged to adopt a host mindset. So this means that as a host, you'll kind of go out of your way to help your fellow participants connect and engage with each other. It could be chatting with participants while in line at the lobby bar, or going out of your way to chat with someone who's standing off to the side of the room. Another way to be a host is to arrive early and greet folks as they arrive. And, it could be the first day of the conference, at lunch, or at a reception. Newcomers tend to arrive early, and since they don't know anyone, they just kind of stand around awkwardly. I'm sure we all have those moments. That's happened for us. See, by arriving early on that first day, you can just be, standing by the coffee to say hello, or standing at an empty cocktail table and wave folks over to join you if they're like looking for a place to put down their coffee and muffin. You'll have lots and lots of time later in the day to catch up with all your old friends. Just for those first 30 minutes, really focus on greeting other attendees that you don't already know. And the benefit of being this kind of informal host is that it gives you a reason to just talk to anyone and everyone. If you've attended an event a few times, I really want you to consider yourself deputized as one of the hosts. Now, here are a few more ways that you can stand out and make great connections. For instance, you can volunteer. You can join a host committee. You can present on a panel or present a session. And, the funny thing about standing out is you don't actually have to stand in front of the room or take on a volunteer role. You can stand out by actively tweeting just throughout the conference. Just remember, whenever you do this, to use the hashtag for the event so that all the other participants and attendees can notice your tweet. So this is another one of these major plot points for me. When I go to conferences, I notice how people sort of enter a room and where they sit. So even if you haven't planned ahead, I want you to take note that you can still take advantage of what I call small networking moments throughout the conference. For instance, you might feel overwhelmed, right, by that vibrant, chaotic hallway and decide to go into your next session early. And what you're seeing here is typically what happens as the attendees arrive for that session. They will sit as far as possible from all the other folks that are already in the room, and then immediately get on their phone or busy themselves with the program book. And often the first seats to go are on the aisle, and you'll notice that 3 people are sitting one in front of the other on the left of the center rows. And despite their close proximity, they're not going to engage each other. I mean, they're literally sitting behind each other. Now, this diagram, for some of you, it might seem like I'm exaggerating. So here are a couple of photos I took at the last conference that I attended. So this is like the room's just starting to fill up, and look, people are sitting as far as they can. They're all looking down at their phones. This one, this one really made me laugh. It's a session about networking for people who hate networking. That was the topic, clearly. So I actually went down the rows on the right side there, introducing all those people to each other and sort of pointing out the absurdity of all this. So have you ever found yourself sitting as far as you could from others as you entered a breakout session? If so, type yes into the chat box. So I want to know that we're all in this together, folks. So have you ever sort of gone into a room and just kind of sat kind of far from other people, gotten on your phone, just kind of, oh, no, oh dear, yes, says Tom. So I want you to think about this for a moment. Out of a conference of thousands of attendees, the people in this session, well, they chose the same topic. I mean, they could meet all the random people who are in line at the Starbucks in the hotel lobby, but chances are they'll make even more successful connections chatting with the folks that are in this room. Unfortunately, the people in this picture, they just don't realize that the people around them who chose the same topic out of dozens of options and chose to come into the room early, and leave the chaos of the hallway. These are their people. These are the folks they should want to meet. So the room stays quiet, and everyone else who comes in keeps it that way until the room is more than half full and the empty seats begin to get filled in between people. And then the session just begins. So let's look at another way this could go, right? This time, as early arrivals begin to come into the session, the presenter welcomes them at the door, right? And encourages them to chat with the folks who've already arrived. Reinforcing the presenter's message is this ethos, right? That you see at the front of the room. It's the ethos that's been woven throughout the conference. Here with colleagues, go mingle. Here alone, don't stay that way. If you're here with colleagues, go mingle. Here alone, don't stay that way. This will make even the first timer feel emboldened to strike up a conversation with someone else in the room, since that is what everyone else is doing. This leads to folks moving closer together as their conversations become more involved, all while waiting another 5 or 10 minutes for the session to begin. Now, another little side note here is that you should not forget to say hello to the presenter. Ideally, before they get up on stage and everyone else knows who they are, which is why you do some little advanced research to know a little bit about these presenters. The goal is just to have a moment or two with them. At the end of the session, everyone else is going to queue up to meet the presenter, which brings me to my next point. Since you've already briefly met the presenter, you don't need to wait passively in line. Instead, you can work the line. Just, chat with the people who are queuing up. They chose the same session as you and enjoyed it enough to stay after to meet the presenter. The reason for all this is that there's always a networking opportunity after a breakout session, whether it's the chaotic, vibrant hallway, lunch, a reception. Rather than starting from scratch trying to find someone to talk to, leave the session in a conversation with someone you met either before or after that presentation. Another thing I have seen time and time again is that too often people from the same organization sit together whenever possible. Right? You've seen this. And what it does, though, is it reduces the possibility that you'll get a chance to meet your peers from different organizations. So a sign like this is a good reminder, right, to catch up with your coworkers at home. And, the conference is all about taking advantage of the networking opportunities that are all around you. And when I think that when this becomes the ethos of a conference, and when I work with associations around planning conferences this way, this is what I really try to just embed into the ethos, is that it'll make everyone feel comfortable joining a table, saying hello. It just won't feel as uncomfortable, even to someone who's shy. So if this is your first time attending the conference, I want to just encourage you, if there is one, to attend the first timers orientation. It is just a great way to learn more about how the event's structured, and of course to meet people, right? You're going to get a chance to meet people who, like you, are there for the first time and likely just don't know very many people. This is one of my favorite hacks. It will help you get really, really prepared. In fact, this hack was written up in Lifehacker. The title of that article was Prepare for Networking Events by Writing Follow-up Emails Beforehand. And I know at first this sounds really strange, right? I'm telling you to draft your follow-up email before you go to the event. See, what this will do is it'll help you become more aware of who you want to meet and what your purpose is at this event. It's also going to make it much more likely that you'll actually send a follow-up message, which is a super critical part of networking. I have to throw in a little note here about name tags, name badges. See, too often name badges at conferences are hanging closer to one's navel than their lapel. So during the networking quote luncheon, right? The networking luncheon, everyone's name badge is actually below the table line, so you can't see it. And at the networking breaks in the hall, you have to actually stare at someone's navel while shaking their hand, and you can't really bluff to pretend that you know what their name is all along. And while convenient, because they work with any outfit, it's the lanyards that are causing all this navel gazing. So I suggest you just make sure you plan ahead what you're wearing, and then tie up some of the lanyards, like lift your name badge just a little bit higher. I also want to make a note about business cards. See, I love tech tools. I love apps, but even in the age of smartphones and apps, business cards are critical for networking. Here's some ideas, right? So when you receive a business card, jot a note on the back so that you can remember what you had talked about and maybe a resource that you plan to share when you get back to the office. You can also add the date and the name of the event. And this is going to increase the odds that you'll actually do the follow-up you said you do. So who here on the call is really good at doing follow-up? Say me if you're really, really good at doing follow-up. If this is something you struggle with, you can write struggle, because I'm curious. Are people thinking, yeah, who's good at doing follow-up? So you want to really keep track of the business cards that you want to prioritize. It's another really important piece. Now, these tips are really geared towards people who are in more Western cultures, Australia, New Zealand, the US, Canada. The great thing is you can write notes. You can also turn one of the corners down. So you can see the picture here. By turning down the corners, it was super easy for me to distinguish the priority cards from that whole stack that I received at a recent conference. If you combine this tip with the one about drafting your message ahead of time, you can see how easy it would be for you to actually follow through to doing the follow-up. In fact, one more step would be to schedule time to do your follow-up emails. So before you even go to the event, you draft your message, and you also schedule within 2 days of coming home an hour in your calendar. So you actually, have the canned response, they have the message drafted, you have the time set aside, and you have the cards prioritized. Well, Tom would say you'd get much better at doing the follow-up than I believe. So, bottom line, business cards are important, but they are not the point of networking. Consider them a means to an end, right? The goal is about building a supportive network based on strong relationships. Now, for some of you, starting a conversation is difficult. And for many of you, wrapping up a conversation gracefully is challenging. And gracefully is the operative word there. So let's just talk for a moment about ways to start a conversation off on the right foot. So for starters, I suggest that you always greet people by saying your name, even at a conference when you're wearing a name badge, right? As I noted a moment ago, those lanyards and navel gazing kind of get in the way of people being able to actually read your name badge. My favorite opening line is, "Hi, my name's Robbie." Now, you're welcome to take that from me, but I suggest you insert your own name, or it might be a little awkward. Just don't overthink your opening line, right? Keep it short, keep it simple. If you spend too much time really trying to craft that perfect opening line, you just might miss your opportunity altogether. And honestly, the worst opening line is the one you don't even get to say. And if you go home and you send someone an email after that, having not met them, That's not a follow-up email. That's just email. You don't need to leave the house to send email. I have found it much easier to actually meet people while in line for food or line for a drink. And as you're moving through the line, you make eye contact with someone near you and you just start a casual conversation. You could just, ask them their opinion about the specialty drink they just ordered or comment on how delicious the buffalo artichoke cheese dip looks. The point is, just keep it casual. This is not the moment to, whip out your business card and start pitching at them. Let's talk about how to wrap up the conversation gracefully, right? It's another really important piece of it. And I think people who are nervous about starting conversations, it's actually that they're nervous about wrapping them up. They think they get stuck in them a lot. So the key here is that you want to leave them wanting more. Whether you're having a really great conversation or after a few questions, you realize it's just not going anywhere. You want them to leave feeling good about you. That way, when they see you later on, they'll be naturally inclined to introduce you to the people they're standing with. If you're new to a space, a great way to wrap up a conversation is to ask to be introduced. So here's how it would go, right? Oh, hey, do you know anyone here you think I might meet? Or you think I should meet? Then they do a little bit of brainstorming. And it's like, oh, great. Would you introduce me? Right? That's it. Like, do you know anyone here you think I should meet? And then, great, will you introduce me? It's so easy. And it works best, of course, if you're speaking to a regular who goes to these events all the time. But it could work even if that person only knows one other person in the room. It basically allows them to be a connector. Now, the reason it works is because they will learn a little bit about you and they can use that information to try to make like a good match. Now, results, I'll be honest, will vary as far as like who they introduce you to. But using this method, you will over time get closer to making the best possible connections in the room. Now, there's one other thing to keep in mind when you're trying to decide whether it's time to move on. How many people are you speaking with? Right? If there are 3 or more people in your group, you can just kind of slide away while others are talking with, a gesture and a little murmur. You don't need to look each person in the eye and shake their hand and tell them exactly where you're headed. You just say, I'm going to go, and then you just trail off as you're walking away. Easy as that. Most graceful exit ever. Take notice, though, because when there are only 3 of you, well, if someone other than you walks away, there will only be 2 of you. And at that point, you'd need to decide whether it's time to wrap up the conversation by asking to be introduced or by offering to introduce them. You may also want to invite someone else to join you, and then, you can step away once they become engaged in the conversation. But what if it's just 2 of you and you're just ready to move on, right? What do you do and what do you say to exit gracefully? It's a 3-step process that needs to be done without any interruptions, right? Ready? It's grip, grin, and go. So you start by shaking their hand, right? Shaking hands is both the opening and the close of a conversation. It's a social cue. And then you smile and you say something nice like, pleasure to meet you, great running into you, I enjoyed meeting you, so glad you're here. You say something nice. That's the grin, right? It's the smile, but it's also saying that thing that sort of smooths out the fact that you're exiting. And then last, you walk away. That's the go. And honestly, that's the part that most people have trouble with. They end up interrupting themselves and they never leave, and then they wonder why it doesn't work. So remember, the goal is to leave them on a high note. Leave them on a high note so they're looking forward to seeing or hearing from you again. And that is, after all, the basis of relationship building and the point of networking. Now, your job at a conference, more or less, is to find your people. It's a pretty big crowd, though, so that might seem kind of daunting. But hopefully, I've offered you, lots of tips and tools to help you manage that. But here's one more, sort of a graduate level one. One of the ways I have found works so well for deepening connections with colleagues and leaders in my field is to host a small dinner when attending a conference. This is a great tip for anyone who's been attending this event for a few years and really understands the value of being a host and a convener. Another thing to think about is how to connect with the influencers in your field. If you're really inspired by a main stage speaker, tweet at them right then and there, or send them a LinkedIn request with a message. Ask them to meet up with you while at the conference. I've done this. I can tell you that it works. In fact, I ended up meeting the former CEO of Southwest Airlines by sending him a LinkedIn request at a conference. We met up at that conference, and then he was later a guest on my podcast. I included him in my book, and he endorsed my book, which all started because I was willing to reach out to him while at that event. You just never know unless you say hello, right? In an age where information, it can be found in one click, right? And we count likes as engagement. Conferences hold the promise of meaningful in-person connection with like-minded colleagues. Only through thoughtful and strategic planning will this promise become a reality for you. So I want to thank you for joining me for this tip-filled webinar. We covered a lot of material, and you might even be wondering, is there anything left that I could teach you? Well, as a coach and a speaker, I do offer a variety of ways I could be working with you, but I am not actually here to sell you anything in particular. Before we jump into your questions, and this would actually be a great time to take a moment and start typing your questions into the chat box now. So in a minute, we can start to dive into them. I just wanted to share a few more resources with you. So first of all, I want to invite you to listen to my podcast. It's called On the Schmooze, and it's a weekly podcast that features talented professionals who share their untold stories of leadership and networking. It's about 2.5 years old, and in my first year, I did 25 solo episodes where I shared a specific networking tip or technique, and you'll find all of those tips and lots more in my book. If you click on the book link, croissantsvsbagels.com, you can download the bonus bundle. In fact, you can download the bonus bundle without even buying the book. That is 25 of those networking tips formatted in individual PDFs, so they're super easy to save. You can share them. They have a Creative Commons license, so you can send them to your team, your colleagues. Just put them out into the world. If you're someone who's really looking to bring your business to the next level, I want you to know that a few times a year, I offer a 90-day sprint to help a small cohort of entrepreneurial women grow their business through relationship-based business strategies. And if you find that intriguing, I encourage you to check out the details at robbiesamuels.com/more, and then you can schedule a time with me to chat. If one-on-one coaching is more your thing, or if you're one of the guys in the call thinking, wait, where's the program for me? I do have a limited availability to do one-on-one coaching. So reach out via email, schedule a complimentary strategy session. Let's see whether I would be a good fit for you and your business. I do want you to know that the replay from today's session and my 10 tips for conference connections will be available at robbiesamuels.com/Tom Poland. I'll have the replay up there in a couple of hours, and I encourage you to share the link with your colleagues. So now it is your turn. I would love to answer your questions. Let's see, Tom, what's been going on in the chat box? All right, so I see one question from earlier. It's a question about overcoming. So it says, please address overcoming getting into our heads and losing the opportunity to network. Meeting strangers gives you the twitches. So I really think it's about walking in and realizing that you do have value to offer. Now, there was a study by Harvard University and Northwestern University that concluded what you already probably know, Gene, which is that networking makes people feel dirty. That's just a fact. Now, the people in that study who did not feel dirty were the senior executives. The senior executives go into a networking event ready to offer things. They don't really need anything. They offer resources, introductions, they're hiring people, they're mentoring people. So they walk in and they're really looking forward to it. They don't feel dirty about it at all. So why can't we all apply that mindset to walking into spaces? Why can't we all decide, we have things of value to offer in little ways and big ways? And, one of the common moments where we feel most in a deficit and the most like we need something is when we're looking for a job. But if you've ever been a hiring manager, you know how big a pain it is to be a hiring manager. And if you were out at an event and you met a prospective job applicant and they engaged in a great conversation with you, and then they followed up afterwards and had a great package that they can, the resume, cover letter, and all that, you could just like put them to the top of your pile, and it would just make you feel so much better about your job, the hiring process that you're doing. So in some ways, even though you're needing a job, you don't need any job. You're looking for the right job, the right company, and the hiring manager is looking for you. So walk in there ready to present your best self and really share, based on your passion, your experience, what we want to contribute to their company, and then actually follow up and do that application. It's like, instead of thinking, oh, I need a job and like being in a deficit, think about the value you can offer. So I can go into that in much more depth, but this is basically the process that I work my clients through, is helping them think about the big and little ways they can be adding value. Maro's got a cultural moment here. He says,
Robbie.
what if the person you're trying to introduce yourself to reacts in a nasty way? It seems quite common in Italy. So that's rough. Here's the thing. It's not just Italy. I think in certain spaces that is more common. Couple things happen. One is sometimes outsiders are not treated well. So the people who've been going for a long time don't think of themselves as hosts. They're there just to hang out with their friends, and they really forget that the reason they left the house is to meet people. And so that is a cultural thing that happens as far as the culture of the event, not the culture of the country. That happens everywhere. So, in some ways, that's about showing up enough times regularly for people to know what you're about. So if you're too transient, if you, I don't know, show up 3 times in a year, then you're not going to have the kind of impact that you need to have to kind of break through that barrier. But if you do what I call intensive networking, which is where you show up 3 times in 3 months or less, and you actively engage and you get there early and you meet the organizers and you let them know what you're about and you keep showing up and you offer to help maybe clean up or set up and you just keep showing up, people will start to know what you're about. They'll believe that you're going to stick around, and maybe they'll start helping you make introductions. But then after those few months, I think the next step is to actually start inviting some people that you've met there to kind of meet up one-on-one for coffee or for drinks, or maybe invite them to a dinner party you're hosting so that you're, introducing them to the circle that you already have. And that way, when you show up again, you've really established some personal connections that will hopefully help get past that barrier. On the other hand, you don't have to accept anyone else's bad behavior and for any longer than necessary. So you have my full permission to not engage if someone's not being nice back. So don't waste your time is the other piece of this. But if it's a space that you're really trying to break into, you gotta put more effort in than just showing up once in a while. I just recently did this for an association. I not only showed up a lot for the first 5 months, but I started giving articles to the newsletter so that I immediately met all the board members. I became friends with the board presidents, and we went out for coffee and for lunch. So that helped break down those barriers much more quickly than if I had sort of like sat in the back of the room for a little while and then left. Didn't feel like I made a connection. So Tom, do you have any questions you want to throw in here? You're welcome to turn on your mic.
Yeah, thanks. And do me a favor, mute Garrett, would you? Because I'm buggered if I know where he's gone to, but he keeps
you're not
talking
muted,
on the phone in
but
the
I'm also
background.
not hearing you.
Yeah. You hearing me now? Test, test, test. You're not hearing me? I'm
not
hearing me?
I'm not hearing you. You can type something.
I don't know why.
Does anyone else have a question they want to type in who's on the call? I'm happy to entertain. We've got some time, and obviously this is my jam. I love talking about this stuff. So I did not cover everything I know. I've got like 19 hours of content. And if you want to kick back, Maro, you don't need to sleep, right? We'll just keep going.
I don't know why you can't hear me. Anyway, let me know. Can anyone else hear me? Let me know in the chat. Yeah, so, okay, so others can hear me. So it looks like it's maybe your headset there, Robbie.
So other people are hearing Tom. I'm not hearing Tom. That's really strange.
You're probably the lucky one.
Oh, you know what? Hold on a second. Tom, go ahead now.
Just kidding.
I got you. Now I can hear you.
Yeah.
Sorry about
Look,
that.
I don't have any questions, Robbie. I think there were so many great tips there. And I'm a natural introvert, and it sounds like there's a whole lot of other people as well
Yeah.
So there's some terrific. I just love the croissant one rather than the bagel thing. Yeah, the grab, grin, and go wasn't too bad either. I wondered why all those people did that to me.
Grip, grin, and go.
You're the one. Yeah. Great session. Thank you. But anyone else got any questions? I know Mara's just about falling asleep over there in Italy. It's like, man, what is it like 1:45 in the morning over there? So we understand if you need to go now.
What's amazing is we've got Australia, New Zealand, Italy, and the U.S. Represented here. It's pretty good.
Couple more. We got the United Nations, right?
Yeah. So there's a question from Richard. If there's not an app, and he says most of the events he goes to doesn't have an app, what are other ways to prepare for the event? So if there is any kind of social media, so for instance, if there's a Facebook group or a Twitter hashtag, or something like that, then I would say within the few weeks before the event, become active with that. Engage, comment on people's stuff, share people's stuff, retweet, things people are saying, share a little bit of your own content here and there, see what you're looking forward to. The other thing is to figure out what is happening at this conference. Who's speaking, who's being honored, who are the organizers. A lot of information is actually public. Even though you may not have exactly who's attending, you can find out sort of based on those roles that I just mentioned, generally who's going to be there. And you can use that to set your sights on either specific people that you want to meet or the kind of people you want to meet. And that will help you structure your time. I think one of the mistakes people make is either they shy away from meeting anybody because it's hard for them, or they're really gregarious and outgoing, so they talk to a lot of people, but it's not the right people because they didn't do that prep work ahead of time. So taking time to really think about it by writing that follow-up email ahead of time, that'll kind of put you through the paces to have the right mindset to get the most value out of the experience. Anything else? This is great. Give everyone a minute because it always takes time to type something.
Robbie, I loved your tip about connecting with speakers before they go on stage. I thought that was very clever. And very often, with a program, you can figure out who those people would be that you want to connect with.
Now, Tom, you've presented, right, at sessions or something, and you do all this work to get ready, and it's really nice if someone comes up right beforehand and says, "Hey, I'm really looking forward to your talk, and here's an example of why I'm so looking forward to it," or "I read your thing ahead of time and it got me so jazzed." It's just makes the speaker feel more confident. Okay, the thing I prepared, people actually, want to hear this. So in some ways, it's a gift. It's a gift to go over and, you get a quick moment to say hello and thank them for presenting, but it will have almost a greater impact for them than when you line up afterwards and, wait 2 seconds to say thank you.
Yeah, especially if they've read your book or something like that. It's a funny psychology, isn't it, Robbie? But you're quite right. I mean, I've spoken hundreds and hundreds of different conferences and summits and all the rest of it, and it's very true. If someone comes up to you beforehand, and introduces themselves and said, I've read your book, I heard you speak before or whatever, but you kind of feel like you've got a friend in the audience.
Yeah.
And that's the person that's been smart enough to establish a very high level of rapport with you prior to you getting up on stage, because it's this whole thing about reciprocity. They've actually done something that unconsciously has helped you quite significantly. And even though you don't know why, you feel like you're suddenly a friend of that person. And so you're going to be a lot more open to an approach if they want to talk about JV or they want to talk about something else.
Yeah.
Very clever. Yeah.
Well, and you can take it a step further and actually send them a message ahead of time, like before you even get in the room. Start sharing some of their content. Announce to the Facebook group how much you're looking forward to that particular session and tag them.
Yeah. I'll send a bottle of Dom Perignon to my room.
Sure. Tom's like, I'll even tell you the brand. So,
I don't drink, but maybe a bottle of Coke.
Yeah. So then it's just like, at that point, when you walk in, not only will, you'll be like, hi, I'm Robbie. And they're like, oh my God, Robbie. Yeah, thank you. You've seen you post all over Facebook, or I got your tweets or, something like that. I think that it just changes the dynamic. And then you can say afterwards, like, I'd love to, do you have a few minutes during one of the breaks? And I've done that, and people are more than happy to meet up with you. I know when I get off stage, I'm on a high. No matter how tired I was earlier that day, I love presenting, and then I want to talk about it. So at one of my last conferences I presented at, there was lunch afterwards, and I said, "Hey, who wants to take me to lunch? I'm open for it." And a young woman walked up and said, "I'll take you to lunch." And we went to the pub in the hotel, and she got an hour of free coaching. And I was happy to do it. She bought me a $20 lunch, and we had a great time. And otherwise, it's kind of like you wander off into the sunset and no one knows it happened. That's because I'm an extrovert, right? So that might not be, an introvert might want to do something entirely different after their session. But I take opportunities to really engage with people, and that's what works. So I also want to say a few people on this call, including Mauro, hit reply to my email. So a lot of people joined my email list through this webinar, and quite a few hit reply to my welcome message. And I got back to everyone within a day. And that in itself is an example of, building rapport, even before the session happens, So when I saw Mauro hop on, I knew that he was tuning in from Italy. I know how late it is in Italy, and I appreciate him being here. So those are little things that, you can apply that in life in different ways. But it makes a real difference to do that. So I hope that, there's a lot in here to unpack, but I hope you can even take one or two things away, like the bagels and croissants. I had a question here about, can you turn a bagel into a croissant? And I mean, kind of. It depends on, is it a bagel with locks? If it's a bagel with locks, it's going to be really hard to break into. Pardon the puns. But it's important to just think about why break in there? Why not just go where there's already an opening, and then use that momentum to be introduced to someone who's maybe in that circle, rather than trying to like budge your way in. There's a common fallacy that you can kind of stand on the edge of the circle and like laugh in place when everyone else laughs, but people know you don't really know what's going on. So now if you're on the inside of one of those circles and you see someone hovering, by all means, open up your body language, wave them in, and let them know. This is sort of the next step of hosting would be, hey, we were just talking about XYZ, and then, let the conversation continue. That would be, oh my God, they would feel so welcomed in, and they would want to connect with you, and they'd want to engage with you. And so little moments like that actually matter quite a bit. And Mauro says that it is, preparing for a meeting is a lot like preparing for acting. You want to know what it is like, what's my motivation? No, you should know what your motivation is before you go to an event. I think a lot of people show up almost catatonic at these events. They don't know why they're there. They're just moving through the motions. So if you have a sense of purpose, you're going to get so much more out of it. You just will. And if at the end of the weekend you realize this really isn't a place for me, it won't be you wondering, is it because I didn't give enough time and planning and attention into doing this? You might just be like, you know what? That wasn't the right space for me. And you can make that decision more easily, and then focus your energy elsewhere. Because it's not about doing more. It's about actually doing less and having greater returns for your effort. So on that note, I want to be cognizant of the time. We're going to wrap up exactly on the hour because we're good webinar hosts in that way. Tom, thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. I will get the replay out to everyone and have the link available for everyone who wants to join up.
Super. Thanks,
All right.
Robbie. And
Thanks, everybody.
Robbie, and thanks everyone for showing up. Cheers.